to the Right Fit podcast. This is episode 1. The Right Fit pairs brands with social media superstars and influencers directly. And the woman who created that is sitting at the table today, Taryn Williams. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you.
And we have a couple of other people we'll get to in a sec. But Taryn, did you want to just by way of introduction explain what the Right Fit briefly does and why we're sitting here today?
Yeah, I think you captured it so nicely there. Essentially, it's an online marketplace for creative talent. So we have everything on the platform from influencers, actors, bloggers, social media superstars, models, photographers, videographers. But a huge part of the backbone of the platform is social media and social media reach of all of those categories. So not just influencers, but our photographers, our models, our actors. It incorporates all of their social channels. So brands can literally come to the platform, post a brief and find the talent they need and book them and pay them all safely and securely through the platform.
And so we have 2 other people in the room today. Would you guys, Matt, would you like to go first, introduce yourself and how you got to sit at this table to have this discussion about the role of the
It's a illustrious table.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. My name's Matt Holmes. I am co-founder and director of a PR agency in Sydney called Poem. We look after brands such as Google, Adidas, The Athlete's Foot, Expedia, across multiple services, but one of which is influencer marketing. So hopefully I have a little bit of experience around this space. I guess where the expertise might vary between the rest of the guys here is that a lot of times brands are coming to me for recommendations or counsel. So yeah, we look at influencer identification as well as management of those influencers. So it'd be interesting to kind of hear different sides of the coin today from 2 different other points of view.
And over to the other side of the table, Simon.
Hey guys, so my name's Simon Hancock. I am in a pretty fun position where I get to see both sides of the industry. I am a menswear and lifestyle blogger. In addition to that, I also own my own PR and communications agency. And we specialise predominantly in hospitality, so bars and restaurants around Sydney and around Australia, meaning that much like Matt, we also are involved in all of the influencer elements of campaigns that we may work across. But the cool thing is in being involved on both sides of the fence, I guess you could say, really gives you a unique insight into how campaigns are run and how people like Taryn and what she's doing are really disrupting the marketplace, as the phrase goes.
So can we, I'd love to go around the table and have a frank discussion about what an influencer is, because I feel like influencers have forever existed, but we just sort of define them now by way of social media standing and status, which didn't exist 10 years ago. I think there's some really blurry lines around what an influencer is, and I think a lot of people say, oh yeah, I'm an influencer, or that's what I want to do for a living, and they're really outside of the scope. And other people could be sitting like bang on where brands want to get to, and they're just not interested in, partnering commercially with anybody or making that a viable income source for them. So I don't know who wants to go first.
I think it's super interesting. I absolutely love this question because obviously it's something that we get all the time. Yeah. Brands coming to us saying, we've decided we want to work with an influencer who has over 100,000 followers. And we're like, what? How is that an influencer? How is that the right person for your brand? What are you actually trying to achieve? Why have you decided that makes this person an influencer?
Do a lot of brands come to the Right Fit with that vision in their head of, we want to work with an influencer, but they don't actually know what it is? It's like when a marketing person who's 50 plus goes, oh, we've got to make a video to go viral. It's like, it doesn't actually, it doesn't work. Yeah, I know. It's so frustrating because that's not how it works.
We see both complete opposite ends of the spectrum. Yeah. So we definitely see those brands where it's probably their first time dipping their toe in this murky water of working with influencers and not really knowing how that works, what a brief would look like, what success would look like, anything, right through to some of the top tier brands who are incredibly savvy, who know exactly who their target market is, how to speak to them, and how to engage the right influencers for their brand. So we see both ends of the spectrum. So that's why I think it's so important one of the reasons I wanted to create this podcast is trying to educate people around this topic and get some clarity in.
Yeah. So Simon, you're sort of, I guess you are an influencer and then you work with influencers as well. So what's your take on it?
So it's a bit of a mix. I think, I think the one thing that needs to be recognised is as a new industry and an industry that emerged very, very quickly with very little restrictions or guidelines or measurable statistics around it, I think influencer marketing is finally getting to a point where both brands and agencies are cottoning on to, okay, it's all well and good for us to engage an influencer with X amount of followers. We've now gotten to a point with how is that actually translating to sales? How is that translating with reach? We are getting to a point as a collective where we're realizing there may be someone that may only have 20,000 followers, but they write the most influential men's blog on automobiles and vehicles. So for a certain brand, that's going to be a lot more valuable than someone with 500,000 followers who doesn't have that correct demographic.
Yeah.
So I guess in answer to your question, what is an influencer? I think at this stage, it's a valuable person that a brand or an external agency can identify and say, this person is aligned with your brand, what your brand wants to do, and the message that your brand wants to give out to the world.
Yeah. Awesome. Matt, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think similar to the previous 2 points, I guess from our point of view, I think the scale is a really interesting one, because I think initially, perhaps just from personal experience, people are looking through their own Instagram channels, and Instagram seems to be a real focus when we talk about influencer marketing, when actually, blogs seem like so long ago now, but we're actually recommending to a lot of clients to use multiple channels, particularly not just focusing on Instagram, particularly obviously since Facebook took up the reins and it's now really difficult to get cut through. So somebody within a niche interest group can have far more influence to, as Simon mentioned, to 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 followers, rather than just constantly going after very few of which actually exist in Australia, those kind of 100,000 fan plus. So an interesting experience for us was when we started working with Google, which was a pretty eye-opening and experience and pretty crazy.
Have you been to Google head office?
We have, yeah.
Is it really awesome?
It is really awesome, and there are really scooters.
Is it like a movie?
It is a little bit like that, yeah.
That Owen Wilson's in?
With Owen Wilson and
they ride on the walls, they ride on the glass. That's my dream.
There are scooters. There's lots of outbound.
Everyone's on segways.
And ironically, there's so much fun that there's consoles, there's other areas where you can build computers, and funnily enough, there's more people doing that than there are playing the consoles, but I think that's
interesting.
The nerd burgers within Google. But one of the first things we did actually for them was that they provided us with what they use in the US, which is a model of tiering. And that was based purely on reach. And I think the first exercise that we went through the team in Google Australia about was actually looking more at engagement rather than just numbers. I think there's been a few dark days within influencer marketing where it was purely just about the public numbers that you could see on your own channels, and there's been a few audits over the years where we've seen so-called influencers almost kind of disappear off the face of the planet once that cull's been done. So we try and look at the engagement more than we do the reach, or at least try and find a balance between the two. So you can, with certain niche interests, find somebody who has a really small following, but they're highly engaged and have way more influence than a beauty blogger who you're trying to spread your product to 1 million people, and a lot of their audience might be male, which is another topic we'll probably come on to shortly.
So, okay, it's interesting because it's still so hard to define, I think, what an influencer is, because there's like so many variations and interpretations. So Taryn, when people on, not the brand side, so when people on the influencer social media side come to you, what sort of process do they go through in order to be, I guess, greenlit, to be presented on your platform as an influencer for brands to engage with?
Yeah. So we start with a minimum follower count of 5,000 followers across any two channels. So that can be Instagram or Twitter, because they're the only two that we can publicly link into. Unfortunately, Facebook doesn't allow you to pull in friends lists or a public Facebook page.
Right.
So it can be combined of the two. So we started at a minimum of 5,000 just because that's what's viable for brands to start engaging with. Anything under that is probably not worth them sort of engaging with as an influencer status.
Yeah.
And then we go through a full screening process. So we check engagement. That's incredibly important to us to make sure that they have not just a broad reach, but a strong engagement. And then we look at what sort of niche they fall into. So we turn down over 60% of applicants to the platform.
Wow.
We get nearly 250 applicants a day, though. So
Wow.
it is a
That
huge volume. It's someone's full-time
really
job just
insane.
going through applications of people that want to join the
Didn't make the
ride.
list then.
Are these,
So,
250 applications a day?
Yes.
And are these, I guess it's probably hard to generalize, but are these people that are going, I want to make a full-time living out of my Instagram account?
A lot of the time it's people who have already started monetizing their accounts and they're
Yeah.
looking for a safe and secure way to make that a more professional and viable career for themselves. So at the moment they might fall into that. I mean, our top influencer has just over 1 million followers. So anywhere from sort of this 5,000 mark right through to the sort of 1 million follower mark.
Yeah.
And they're looking for a safe way to monetize it. They either have an agent or don't want to have an agent. Either we are not exclusive, so you can absolutely work with us if you have an agent or a mother
Yeah.
agent.
Yeah.
And they're looking for a way, when brands approach them on a social media channel, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or their YouTube channels, to be able to safely direct them somewhere and ensure that they get paid for the work that they do. It covers all the contracts for them, covers all their insurances, and just makes it a much more legitimate process than, I guess, someone hitting you up on Instagram saying, hey, do you want to collaborate with us and do this post? So
Yeah. Matt, have you ever been in a situation where you've tried to engage an influencer for a brand and it hasn't worked out? They've said, actually, no, that doesn't align with my, my personal direction or like what I actually want to do, even though they might have over 100,000 followers and it just for whatever reason didn't.
Yeah, no,
seem
that
to
has happened actually. With the mummy blogger space, I think there was I can't recall the exact detail as to why she was uncomfortable working with the travel brand, but that did happen. I'd rather that happen more often than not.
Yeah.
Or
so
maybe
that's
not
what I
more
was
often
gonna
than not,
say.
but I'd rather that happen a little bit more often than it does, because I think
Yeah.
it shows that there's more integrity with that individual in terms of who they're aligning with. I think it's actually pretty rare.
absolutely.
And I think that's the role of agents or people coming into this space. I think, as Simon mentioned, it's developed so quickly. There's very little regulation around it, and therefore most people understandably don't understand the commercial elements of what is essentially a small business.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Just to jump in there, I know there are, and I think that trend, well, not even trend, but I think that authenticity is starting to emerge, especially among people who do want to have a credible brand within the industry. For myself, I probably turn down 2 to 3 collaborations per week from brands that approach me either directly or approach me through management, either because it's something I'm not passionate about or it's because it's something that I don't think my audience is going to engage with. So,
Is that kind of empowering?
well, I mean,
When you're
look,
like,
it is.
actually, no.
Yeah, it is different for me because
Thanks for knowing.
I guess it's a bit different for me because I'm an influencer who isn't trying to make it their sole source of income.
Yes.
So I do have that flexibility to really pick and choose who I work with, and the freedom and the authenticity that can give you is huge. But I really would never see the value in, and as I said, opportunities come up all of the time. And if it's not a product that I personally get excited about, or it's not a brand that excites me, I won't just do it for the dollar. And I think there's a trend there of influencers really building their niche market and really building that valuable core base of subscribers that go, we love what you do and we love how you live and the different elements
and they
about your
identify
life.
with that. Absolutely.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And because it makes sense. I think that's important. Like as somebody in media, to align yourself with things that make sense for you. Otherwise, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
If you're saying yes to one thing and then contradicting yourself in another post or through a blog or just through even being an ambassador for something or an affiliation, your audience is savvy and they're going to go, but hang on, so you're bullshitting me?
Yeah.
Like and that's, I think, something that brands probably need to be aware of as well. So how do we think, like we mentioned it a little bit, that this is an industry that it really can't be defined specifically and there aren't that many parameters around it. How do we think it's going to sort of, I guess, flow in the next sort of 12 to 18 months and grow and what, do we think that there's going to somehow be like an organisation that has to almost police stuff online as far as hashtag spawn, so people know that it's a sponsored post, or those sorts of questions I think are coming up legally even at the moment.
Well, I know from an agency perspective, and it's something that influencers who are listening is probably something to be aware of, and it's not something that's spoken about too frequently yet, but there are the intelligence and the availability of back-end tools to measure success and to measure reach and to measure authentic engagement across influencer activities. So that could be on your blog, your Instagram, your Twitter. The tools available to an agency side to really measure the authentic reach an influencer is increasing daily. So I think over the next 12 to 18 months, there will be a massive growth in that technology, and I'm sure Matt can shed a little more light on this as well. But I think that again just brings back to the message of it's really important to be authentic, and it's really important to, rather than focusing on a huge audience, focus on an authentic audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, there's regulations that have been put in place, or recommendations, probably, I think more so from a legal perspective, guidelines from AANA. A lot of them are common sense. Also, I guess the use of hashtag sponsored or hashtag ad for somebody who's built a career from PR and earned media, I have a little bit of an issue with a lot of the campaigns we've worked with having a hashtag ad on them, because it's about being earned, I think more about the relationship. And I think in most cases, we would never try and dupe the audience, that there has been some kind of partnership or collaboration with the brand. And I would never advise a client to do that anyway. People are far too savvy these days to immediately call that out. Measurement tools as well, I guess there's the responsibility, I think, is twofold. One from agencies. Again, I think there's probably been a little bit too much money thrown at influencers or into this space from advertising agencies and media agencies who are just used to essentially paying to create noise. And I think that's where PR agencies in particular have perhaps better experience of understanding kind of building relationships that are long term, which is definitely the approach that we would make. But then also, I think there's a responsibility on the influencers, if you're going to try and build a career in this space, to use Business Manager and to use plenty of decent free tools out there that you can then provide the metrics and measurements that increasingly you're going to be required to do so before entering into a commercial relationship, because marketing budgets have been cut across the board.
Yeah.
Rightly, marketers are more and more accountable than they ever have been, and yet this influencer marketing space has kind of come in on the blind side and has been completely unregulated and a bit of a wild west. But you'll only get away with that once, and I don't think you'll be able to build a relationship with a brand or a career if you start refusing to give some pretty basic metrics, which has happened on a lot of occasions, more so a few years ago, to be honest. But
okay. So Taryn, what are some of the success stories that you've seen? I mean, so the Right Fit launched in August last year, so you have seen like an incredible amount of growth in a very, very short space of time.
August last year.
Yeah, it was.
That's insane.
It's been
actually crazy.
Phenomenal. Yeah, it's been pretty crazy, and obviously just seeing the product adapt as well and how people have used it. Obviously, when we first launched, obviously social media was at the backbone of everything that we did, but it wasn't really designed for a pure play influencer space. And it's been really fantastic seeing brands think a lot more about how they engage influencers as part of a broader campaign. So seeing brands engage an influencer to be a part of their hero brand campaign shoot, as well as using them to then amplify that content across their own channels. So instead of just saying, hey, we'll gift you some clothing, or hey, would you like to be in this shoot that, we'll pop on our social channels, they're actually coming up with a much broader strategy and saying, hey, how could we engage an influencer as part of this really broad campaign from the start? How could we hire someone who has a really great authentic reach in our space and get them to blog for us on a regular basis and then appear in our TV commercial and our print campaign, and then seek that out across their social channels as well. And it being a much longer, more authentic, I think, relationship, which I think is, as Matt sort of touched on, really important, that it's not just these sort of flash in the fire one night campaigns, that it is like something that's engaged and sustained over time.
Yeah. Do you guys think, don't ask you all this question. Do you think it's dangerous for brands with marketing budgets to entrust somebody who might have a lot of followers on Instagram, but might get caught DUI in a week, and you have no idea that might happen because you've not met this person, you've not sat in a room with them, you have no agreement necessarily in place, no understanding of who they are. Is it dangerous to be throwing money at people just because they're really hot on social media and you don't know what's going to happen in 6 months from now, when that brand alignment might still be very in the front of people's minds?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a spiky question in the fact that if I look back, I suppose, in the traditional space of working with talent from a TVC perspective or in PR campaigns, there were probably contracts in place a lot more regularly than there are on just simple posting, and conflict clauses and obviously behaviour clauses that would negate payment if, like you said, if that happened with a celebrity. I mean, there are going to be idiots anywhere in any shape whether they happen to be celebrities or I guess
not influencer.
Other
I word.
Yeah, I had to be careful there. Censored. I think the risk is slightly less in the levels of money that are being spent in comparison to what was gone before, but and whether those relationships are particularly long term, and in most cases they're not. So I don't think most consumers would kind of immediately make the connection between a lot of influencers and a particular brand in one instance, whereas in the past, individuals such as Tiger Woods, when he gets himself into trouble, then the association's right back to Nike is a very quick one. But I do think, again, when we were talking about just being a little bit more due diligence, and rigor, I think there needs to be more agreements in place than perhaps there are at the moment in the experience that we've had. But again, I think that just comes to having the right counsel, whether it's an agency or whether it's dealing with somebody directly who's savvy. And to Simon's point earlier, which I absolutely love, like he cares about his community and his audience and knows what they like.
That's awesome.
And that's always going to be your best filter. I think, again, we're talking a lot about kind of pay for play. Personally, it's not the best way to use influencer channels. I think it's if brands can let go of the reins a little bit and bring consumers in and give them control and ask them to curate or create content on their behalf, as opposed to what traditionally might have happened is we've created this piece of content or a TVC or this product. Can you essentially just sprue it for us? And that was about as complicated as the relationship was. And I just don't think that's the right way to go.
Yeah. Taryn, I mean, I know that you're a very busy woman, so I doubt that you're across all of the briefs.
So important.
It's amazing you're even here.
Cancel 3 meetings to be here. I'm sure that you don't see every brief that comes across the Right Fit platform, but can you give some sort of scope of how much paid activity your brand partners want as opposed to contra activity and just, product placement or, post for gifting type scenarios?
Yeah. It would be hard to give you the exact number breakdown, but it's probably about roughly, I'd say 60% paid, 40% contra offers, opportunities. And that really goes across sort of all of the different categories. So, for example, we have influencers who are top tier photographers and videographers on a paid travel trip at the moment. So they're going away. They're not, so they're being paid to capture content, but as part of that, seeding across their social channels because they're also travel bloggers. And so there's really interesting opportunities like that, which in some cases would normally be an unpaid opportunity. And then there's right through to sort of, gifting products, alcohol brands, gifting stock. For contra opportunities as well. So I think it's a really interesting offering in that it allows all different kinds of influencers to get involved and start working with brands and understanding how a commercial relationship would work, and the processes to go through and understanding their audience and their reach, and exactly as Simon was talking about, starting to figure out what they want to do and how they want to craft their career and what sort of brands they want to be aligned with, and the ones that we see who are incredibly successful and get the best feedback, because a huge part of the platform is the ratings and reviews process. And that we do see, and I do stalk daily. Just confession.
You start.
Because I love seeing we get feedback from both sides of the marketplace. So it's really interesting seeing what the influencers say about brands and how the campaign was pulled together from a brand side as well. And then seeing from a brand, why they engaged particular influencers and how the campaign succeeded. They look very much into the return on their investment and what the click-through was, or what the positive brand sentiment was around the posts that they do. So that's been really interesting for me, seeing, I guess, both sides of the marketplace, how they feedback. And
so, Simon,
Yes.
How much time do you spend being an influencer? And how, because it's...
And can you separate the two?
Yeah.
And
Today I'm going to be an influencer.
Yeah. I've got my influencer pants on.
It's Tuesday. Influencer Tuesday.
I mean, how much of your free time, spare time are you dedicating to growing this thing and versus having a real job?
Look, it's... Yeah, it's... Look, Maz, it is definitely a combination. For example, today, I have had a pretty mental week at Huddle Group over the last week. Today, I looked at my Instagram account. I haven't posted in 5 days.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's pretty unusual for me. Usually, I'll try to at least be every couple of days. Again, for me, it's all about going back to kind of quality, not quantity at the moment. The good thing and what I love about the position that I'm in, and I'm sure plenty of influencers out there in the same position as well, is working in a creative industry like PR and communications and working as an influencer. They go hand in hand. So there have been opportunities that have arisen, collaboration opportunities with Taryn in The Right Fit, where we've connected clients with her and vice versa. There's been opportunities where I've been engaged as an influencer and then they've become a client in creative work. So for me, it definitely intertwines, and that helps because it is pretty much the same industry. But I'd have to say, to be honest with you, probably 70% real work, 30% influencer.
No, you're not doing it well enough.
It just comes naturally. That's what you're saying.
Unless it's after 9 p.m. and then it's 100% influencer. Till midnight, baby.
100% under the influence. Okay, before we wrap it up, my final question to you guys, because I'm so certain that there will be a lot of influencers listening to this podcast trying to get some insider tips on how they can engage with a brand better. So Matt, I'll kick it off with you. Do you have any advice for influencers listening on how they can maximize that brand engagement potential on their platforms?
Initially, I'd just say seek advice. I think it treats it like a small business, and therefore, if you think that you need counsel or advice on how to build a platform, then there are plenty of management companies out there or individuals that can represent you and will negotiate the right levels of fee. But more importantly, help you from a measurement perspective. The other one is authenticity. I think it's just the most important thing within this space. I think it's a word that we've all mentioned. Be clear about what your passion is, and the tools that are out there in terms of how we identify influencers and look at particular categories. If you've got a clear passion for a particular brand, then it's going to come through and come to the light. And that's where a brand advocate is actually far more powerful to a particular brand if you make the right connection than going to a bikini or beauty blogger just for the sake of the fact that they've got 500,000 followers. So be authentic, stick to your passion, know your audience, and don't be afraid to ask questions or look for advice out there, because there's plenty of good and bad advice. So I'd seek have multiple connections and questions.
Taryn, what is your advice for influencers? I feel like you're going to say, don't contact the brand directly. Leave it on the platform.
Please, yes. If a brand contacts you through The Right Fit, this is, it blows my mind. We do have influencers who will
don't
then go,
do it, guys.
But Adidas, I thought they might want to hear from me.
They don't care about you yet.
That's why they posted a brief. No, that's definitely why they posted a brief on The Right Fit. That's why they would like to hear from you. Totally agree with what Matt said. I think it's so important. Firstly, know your audience. really get clear about what your offer is. So when you're going to a brand or a brand's approached you to work with them, be really, really clear about what you're offering, what it is that you want to offer them, how you want to engage and work with them, why you think it's of interest to why it should be of interest to them and why it's of interest to your followers, and how you would see that creative campaign coming to life. So don't just say, hey, I'd love to work with you, I've got 500,000 followers or whatever it might be. Say, I'm actually going on this trip to Vietnam and I'd love to engage your brand on it, and this is how I would see it coming to life, and this is how I want to see the story coming out. I've put together a mood board. Put some effort into it. As Matt said, it is a business and this is a commercial relationship. As Matt said, don't be afraid to ask questions. Really make sure that you understand what's expected of you, and then really make sure you honor your commitments. Make sure that you are posting on time, make sure you're meeting those deadlines, and be communicative. That's what brands want. They want to hear from you. They want to hear your suggestions, they want to hear your ideas, and they want to hear from you through the process.
Yeah, cool. Simon?
I struggle with this one because I totally agree with everything that Matt and Taryn said. I was like, what was I going to say? But then I think one piece of advice I could give to influencers, if you are engaged by a brand that you're passionate about, and if it's a brand that you would love to continue to work with, go above and beyond. Every single time I'm engaged by a brand, I will always do an additional Instagram post, a cheeky blog post every now and then, an Insta story. Find unique and creative ways to give even more to that brand than what they've engaged you for, because I guarantee you, from a brand and agency perspective, that is going to keep people coming back to you. People love to see that commitment to creativity and commitment to success. So don't just do what's on that little piece of paper. Go above and beyond. Have some fun with it, and remain as authentic as possible.
Nice. Well, guys, thanks so much for your time.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much for the Right Fit podcast. I think we did okay. Should we get a selfie?
I love it. Oh my
I feel
gosh.
Yes.
Totally.